It's 7:00 p.m. I will call this meeting of the Waterbury Select Board on our regular meeting day at a later meeting time to order for Monday, September 1st, 2025. Happy September to all. Happy Labor Day to all. I'm celebrating with my first summer cold. First up on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
Suggestion, forgot to include approval of minutes for 8/18.
It's not A.
It's in the consent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, that's right.
Okay, so notes with regards to agenda, are we proposing moving to a future?
I just read them.
Yeah, me too, because I just told Cheryl I was gonna add the adjournment.
The agenda for tonight, but
They
they
are
are
posted.
all posted online. From
Enterprising people can go find them.
under last week, or last meeting.
Okay, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay.
I'll sign it.
We want to. Motion by Kane, second by Roger to approve the agenda as presented, including the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? Right, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the agenda is approved. Next up, we have the consent agenda. The items on that include the minutes of our last select board meeting on August 18th. Special events permit for Switchback Beer Works Inc. for 9/16 at the Country Club of Vermont. A special events permit for Smuggler's Notch Distillery for 9/25 to 9/28, and a request to cater permit for the Chamber of Calcutta at Forest Landing. Is there a motion on the consent?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Kane, second by Mike to approve the consent agenda. Is there any questions or clarification on this? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, consent agenda is approved with Tori abstaining from that. All right, that brings us to public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for anyone who would like to speak to something that is not on the warned agenda that we approved. We ask folks to keep their comments 5 minutes or less, and if needed, we're happy to schedule something for a future meeting agenda. Is there anyone who wants to speak on public comment? I'll go Bill Sheplock and then the gentleman in the blue. And thank you, Bill, for coming up. It helps with the online recording for Zoom.
So I was gonna say this. So I admire all of your dedication, and frankly, I think it's a shame that you're meeting on holiday. I know that you have a lot of businesses. I know that it's hard to reschedule, maybe you can't miss this week and it might not be convenient other times, but I just want you to understand that while it may be okay for all of you, it inconveniences some of the public who would maybe like to have a holiday and not have to come here on a holiday. I'm retired, I was in town, it's no big deal, but I have friends and family that work and kids that go to school, and this is another day that I could spend with them. So I'm not angry, but I'm just saying in the future, you know, there's a lot of people that are here working that maybe would prefer to have a holiday. So just like, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
And I know a lot of people have to work on holidays, gas stations, restaurants. There's many people that have to work, but you don't have to.
Yes, and if you wouldn't mind just coming up and introducing yourself.
Personally, I'm grateful that you're here today. My name is Dustin LaPierre. I'm a 10-year Waterbury resident. Worked in pretty much every restaurant in town. Used to do landscaping with Peter and Charlie O'Brien. Worked with Ed Steele and moved around. Currently actually work at Core Power in Golden Park. And I thought it was my duty to come here and raise just a couple issues, take a couple minutes. I'd like to make you aware, if you're not already, that the white phone in front of the Stone Pizza is a magnet for accidents. Likely this is due to a combination of poor driving and the location of the base being street. I've witnessed around 20 incidents since those reconstruction of various types of damage to the posts and vehicles, including brake lines debris being left on the street and sidewalk and confused drivers abandoning the damage. Occasionally a vehicle will be up against the post in such a way that attempting to drive away will cause it. Looks like we started in a random selection of.
So do you own a building there?
You know,
Do you own a building there? Just wondering.
I live right there, 17 Stowe Street. I can, I have a USB drive for the video and it's. Second is. As a downtown Stowe Street resident, we're subjected to a lot of noise in general. Whether that's pre-dawn deliveries, trash removal, construction, traffic, etc. Pretty much goes with the territory of the deal. Something unusual, on August 29th, the local business had an event which ran until after 1 a.m. The music, especially the bass, was clearly distinguishable and felt on the entirety of the street and in the apartments of nearby residents. As patrons entered and exited the event, the door opening caused it to be even louder. I appreciate that a thriving business was able to create an enjoyable experience. However, once all background activity and traffic on Stowe Street has gone silent around 9:30 p.m., the loud sound waves become very distinct and impossible to escape. And you don't necessarily owe me an answer tonight, but I would like to understand what, if any, ordinances may be applicable to late night noise on Stowe Street and how a balance could be met to keep everyone happy. That's it.
Thank you.
I will read you my comments and USB drive with some videos.
Great, thank you very much. Comments and video are being left. I'll just say for the public who didn't see the screen turned around, we had a red sedan backing into the light post that was identified as also a larger vehicle with a trailer. Just for right now.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the comment, right?
Just in response. I do feel, one with the light post, I do feel having someone to drive the truck. I parked in the space and it's always kind of a little bit of a challenge to park there, but. You know, I guess I'm one that, I see something, I figure out what to do. As to the noise, I'm not gonna ask you what business, but. I'm curious if whatever business is permitted to have music beyond a certain. I think you're. So you don't.
I know which business it was, I'm not trying to.
Right.
Understand. Rules that may apply.
Do we have like, we have kind of sort of.
We do.
We don't have the results.
I think that's something I'm going to go to is an update of the ordinance. There's a couple ordinances that surrounding from the state has that need to potentially adoption.
So this is not just this is regular business, not special.
Yeah, so Mike, I think we're gonna not litigate it on public comment, noting that maybe it's a future agenda item in general, we've been working for instance, but thank you. Is there anyone online or in person else who wants to speak on public comment on any topic? All right. Seeing none, I will move us on to our next agenda item, which was seasonal traffic concerns in Waterbury Center and discussion of potential interventions. I will say, I put this on the agenda because if you've been reading Front Porch Forum, there's been quite a lot of discourse about the upcoming fall foliage season and concerns particularly from residents in Waterbury Center about the traffic on some of the roads. There was reference to prior select board action on this. Last year, there had been a vote around posting some roads, local traffic only. There was some discussion of things that have been done in other communities, so I guess my proposal would be to start to hear from Tom around kind of the range of solutions available, to hear from anyone in the public with concerns and have some select board discussion. Is that what proposed? Tom, do you mind taking it off around what we
Yeah.
can do, I guess, on the spectrum of options?
So what you can do, I think, in talking to Public Works, I think what the most effective thing you can do for the long term is to consider a budget item next year where you install, sorry, couple issues. I know it's seasonal traffic, but speeding is part of that, and so you can consider a budget item next year, perhaps in the range of $30,000 that would allow us to get about a half dozen temporary speed bumps that could be deployed in different places in Waterbury Center. 5-6 grand per speed bump, just a number to think about in your head. We've got some options there. I also just want to remind people that in September, the Better Connections Committee is hosting a walking tour of some of the area we're talking about to get a sense of the traffic problems for the consultant. You did post the roads in a prior year. I don't have any sense that led to any meaningful change in terms of the congestion. But I think you still have legal authority to do that if desired. The struggle we have is not a lot of options in terms of addressing volume. And you know, not a shock to say that we've got two entrances into, you know, we've got our main artery into the village is really one place. So it's a challenge based on our history, but we spent some time just trying to talk about different ideas in terms of volume, and really unclear how you what you do about that.
Great, so to elaborate further on that, I guess just Tom, you mentioned, so we have an existing traffic ordinance with broad authority to do this type of thing. I'll say, I know there were some folks very supportive and enthusiastic about it, some folks concerned, as has been named, speeding was the one potential intervention on that is speed bumps. I guess I would also name maybe targeted enforcement. Is there anything to?
Yeah, there's certainly targeted enforcement, and that's something that the state police help us with every year, but again, pretty limited service. We've got one trooper on. So that's, you know, only a whole lot of only a certain amount of places that one person can be.
What's it, Roger?
Yeah, I know in years past, this is something that comes up every year. And in years past, Cold Hollow Cider has engaged the sheriff's office to put an officer out in front of their place to direct traffic in and stop and let the folks taking a left out of there out. Otherwise, things get really bottled up at that particular juncture. And I haven't been in touch with Dan Snyder this year as to, but I'm sure he's got this on his mind, and we could follow up with him to see if that measure is being taken. I know that Bill Sheplik has opined that we don't have the authority to put up local traffic only signs because of public thoroughfares. I don't know if that's been adjudicated or not, but in any case, those signs didn't seem to have acted there. It seems like this may be a problem that we have to learn to live with to a certain extent, and adequate warning. Maybe local residents need to recognize that on any given Saturday between the end of September and first couple of weeks of October, They should expect traffic and they should plan for it.
It was great for you, and I'll just say, I said we were gonna do Tom, public select board, looks like select board wants to speak, so I'll let that happen, and. This is a longer item, so people can, go ahead.
I would just say like, I fully appreciate. Cold Hollow Cider and Dan Snyder like doing that and they. Have that officer, so I think that really helps, but I would not mind exploring for next year, maybe some speed bumps on Main Street that are temporary, just because. People would long down that, I mean, I get increased traffic, like if we keep receiving it, it's just. A fact, like, but I've never mind.
Yeah, that's a common one we hear about.
Yeah, Maple Street's common, there's speeding and traffic violations, it's not. I think last year, Roger brought up Cold Hollow, we actually spoke. With Dan last year. But a lot of the complaints we've been seeing this year on Front Porch Forum, I tried my best to read them all, but there were many. Most of them are coming off of Maple Street and the adjoining streets. It has nothing to do with Cold Hollow, right? So yes, on your GPS, it'll show you that it's bottlenecked on 100. Sure.
That, I mean, and part of that is.
Right, sure, but it's traveling to and from Stowe, right, which has really bottlenecked all the roads up. Yes, last year when we put up the signs, they had no effect. I mean, I live right on that junction. See all the cars coming in. They all get bottlenecked right there between Maple Street, Hollow and Howard. They're all stuck. Going down Guptill. One of the complaints that I read on Front Porch was from Perry Hill, which was a new road that we hadn't heard from in previous years. Because we all have GPS now, GPS is just gonna tell you the best way to get somewhere. And so right now it's Perry Hill, so that's where we're hearing new complaints from. And I think having seen the signs have no effect, and while there were folks who commented that the signs were too small or there needs to be some sort of blocking mechanism, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think the roadblocks or the speed bumps are a viable option, but that doesn't help with bottleneck traffic because the traffic's already stopped anyway. It's already bumper to bumper, no one's going 60 miles an hour down Maple Street if it's backed up. I think I don't have a solution in my head to this problem because we live in a tourist economy and we rely on folks to come up and look at trees. But what I will say is Nealon Flats and Perry Hill are not major thoroughfares. So the locals who live on Nealon adjacent, Guptill adjacent, or Maple Street adjacent roads have the option to get out of that bumper to bumper traffic by taking Nealon Flats to Perry Hill and then into the village to get, if they need to get down here. There might be some solution where we can limit the amount of traffic on those fares as they are not major thoroughfares like Guptill and 100 and Maple Street are. Would be my quick solution so that folks in Waterbury Center can still get to the village and try and get around that traffic as best as they can. But that's all I was able to come up with how much we can and can't do legally.
We have Mike next, and then I know there's a number of folks who want to speak.
I agree with a lot of the comments that Kate has made. I know I got an email, and I don't know if the rest, sometimes they may just email us individually as select board members, someone who was complaining about the amount of traffic. This was before the Stowe Street, bridge was done, complaining about being backed up for 45 to 50 minutes. And I was gonna say, I even asked some of the people here, some of the staff, I said, if commuted that way, do they get back? Because I haven't seen it being backed up. Most of the time, I saw it being backed up was early when it first started and people weren't used to it. It got a lot better. And it probably toward the end, probably maybe increased again. But some people said, I asked, maybe the staff member, she said, yeah, see frequently, but part of that is without a major, infrastructure change to change our, have a bypass or something like that, which would cost millions of dollars. I don't know if, and it's something that, as Kane says, and we do rely upon tourist economy. And, some of us, as much as we're inconvenienced, we deal with it because we need to see the business pipeline.
So we have about 15 minutes left for this. I know there were several hands. I'm gonna go Chris, Bill, and I know there was someone else who had hands, so we'll start with Chris. You have somebody talking.
I was curious there. No, you're not specific in. Events that you're talking about here, it's just a kind of in general thing, but I'm sure it's changing to foliage upcoming foliage. I'm kind of on board with Roger. Can't advertise the hell out of yourself to have everybody come and then take their money and then bitch because they're trying to get home. We resign ourselves to the house and just watch the traffic and kind of chuckle about the whole thing. And if people are already complaining online about it, maybe they ought to plan ahead. Obviously, they're aware of it. This the whole speed bump issue. And I kind of chuckled when you said that because there's no speeding going on when it's bumper to bumper for hours on end. The only issue I'd have is that, when would these be deployed? And commercial trucks, they have issues, starting stopping going. But yeah, it's part of what we've created here and where we live. I mean, I know there's some people that have to get out. I don't know what percentage of that is. Realistically, a few. So that's why I don't get on the front porch for them, because I just ain't into it.
Thanks, Chris.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that, these folks come here and we want them to come, our businesses want them to come. And I know the challenges, people coming from Stowe. But there are people who do from away, who want to go up Perry Hill, and come down Perry Hill from the top toward the flats. It's one of the most spectacular views of foliage that there is. And to put a sign up saying that unless you live here, you can't go on this road, I just think that's overkill. I don't know what the ordinance says. I don't know if it's the same traffic ordinance that was in place when I was here. I do know that, there are things in the state law that allow select boards or the managers to make certain decisions about roads and highways. But I think they're all codified as law. So you have the authority to do what the law says. You can allow a parade to happen like we do on July. You can post the road to keep commercial vehicles off roads during mud season. Those are all things that are laid out in the statutes that say that you have the authority to do. I don't think that you have the authority to just say this road is for only local traffic. I may be wrong, but as I said last year, you get money from the state for all the town highways that we have. And Guptal Road is a class 2 highway. We get a lot more money for that road than you get for class 3 roads. So I think you need to be careful about it, but I don't want to minimize the fact that there's an issue. And maybe there's something that you can think about. I don't know if it's something that you can do for this year. I don't know if they're around, if you have enough money in the budget. It could work at Old Hollow or Ben and Jerry's, but you need the state involved. But I had the thought the other day, I said, when Austin was fixing the Guptal Road Bridge a year ago, they had a temporary traffic. So why can't you put a temporary traffic light at Guptal Road and Newland Flats? And if people are coming down Gilman Flats and they can't get on to Gupple Road because there's too much traffic and nobody gives them a break. If you put a red light there and the guy coming down Gupple Road has to stop for the red light, then people can, man, they're gonna turn into a line of traffic. It might still take them half an hour to get to Route 100 where there's another traffic light, but maybe you can use some temporary traffic lights in these real bottleneck areas, maybe Sill and Maple Street or Howard Ave. It's just a thought. I'm not saying that you've got to go out there and do it. You know, Cold Hollow, trying to get the sheriff's department there. That's dependent upon two things. One, can Cold Hollow afford to do it? Two, is the sheriff's deputy available to go out there and do it? If you can work with the state and they would be willing to put a temporary traffic light there, that would allow people to get out of that parking, same with Ben and Jerry's, it just may be something to consider. So that's all I have.
Yep, go ahead, Jeff.
We need to be clear about what problem. And there's two problems, the volume and, right, and I think there's a volume problem, I accept the comments that have been made, these are public hearings, these are people that are coming in here to visit the county, have a right to be on them. But when they're on the public, they have an obligation. And that's not happening, especially, you know, people who are going around the Cold Hollow, the Metro 100, they come up Kyle Hill, they hit Maple Street, they just want to make as much time as possible, the rest of that crowd done. And I stand out in my front yard, and they're going by 45, 50, 55. And I will say that, and I haven't done any sign, but I mean, a lot of the ones, especially during, are out of state plates, they're flying by. You know, Maple Street is very old, right, and has most of the house, I would say, practically half the house will probably date back, you know, to the 19th century. And because of that, they have very, very small setback, that very close to the beach. So this is, and I know a lot of the people don't have. There's a problem when, if you're getting out of your car, you're smoking, you're out front. But there's also a problem that commercial use control of the car. So one of the things you might want to consider is just conducting as it been done, is conducting monitoring. Just say, how much volume is there, but more importantly, what percentage is still well. And I think that is something that, you know, I think still should be addressed.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone else, Sandy? That's on.
I just have a quick one. Last year, I believe that we talked about putting the yellow lines in on Maple Street, but also maybe Gupple Road, and that make it give the illusion of, I guess, it slows people down. Why didn't you do that?
Just wasn't planned for.
Because that's something. The other thing is, I actually was out of state last week, and something I thought was a great idea, but there was certain towns, the speed limit sign it was a bigger speed limit sign and it was red on the outside and it stood out. Like, I'm like, wow, they must be enforcing this because it was just stood out a lot better than a regular speed limit sign. No, just no, it wasn't even that. It was a regular sign, a little bit bigger, but the outside was a red. Should have taken pictures. So I was like, that is a good idea. And the third thing is just to help out for us local folks. Part of the reason why people take those back roads is because Google Maps says, you know, it's a way. If you're going home or something, if you hit traffic stopped on your Google Map, it will give the illusion that it's stopped there too. People are less apt to go. So you can trick Google Maps into thinking that they're the dead stop too. So if everyone does it, that's a local, it will make a difference.
Thanks, Sandy. So now it's my job to summarize everything I've heard, ranging from a Google Maps campaign to temporary traffic lights. Is there anyone else who has a quick comment on one of the board deliberates? Okay, so I think doing the best I can to summarize, we've heard a range of topics from the public and from the select board. Is there anyone on the select board who feels strongly about boosting roads for local traffic or further? Seeing none, it seems like that is not a next course of action the select board would like to consider. Are there other next step interventions the select board would like to consider? Okay,
I'm just gonna say, last year the signs didn't work, so even if we could roll them out anyway, they didn't work. Bill's idea about temporary traffic lights, for Nealon and Guptal. Made a lot of sense to me.
I'd still like to explore, speed bumps.
I mean, that should be like, not just foliage, just in
Yeah,
general.
I'm fine with not being temporary speed
Yeah.
bumps.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree, like I. Say as much as I can, try to avoid bottlenecks, but the speeding is borderline.
I think the state of, they've always been on, permitting speed bumps, but the idea of temporary speed bumps and being able to take this move around and put out strategically, I think that's something we definitely should. So,
Roger?
I had a question for Tom. How feasible would it be to get a temporary speed bump on Maple Street?
Pretty easy. Just
I mean, this year.
this year, I suspect we could order an we could order,
But there was one on
there was one on,
Bidwell.
yep, I strongly suspect the Public Works Director is hoping no one notices it doesn't get back in a timely fashion.
Well,
We could certainly buy one. I suspect we could have it in this year, but as soon as it's in, we're taking it out for the winter, so.
Mhm.
But if you want me to order a speed bump and Public Works put it in this year, just get 2 votes, decide for yourself, and we'll make that happen. First thing in the morning, we'll order it.
What happened to the one that was on Guptal? All years ago. Shouldn't we still have it?
I don't know.
Did it wind up in the reservoir?
A temporary speed bump, hiding and storing for this one.
I'll second that motion.
Motion by Tori, second by Kane. If there's further discussion. The temporary speed bump, we'll say at the discretion of the manager and public works on location. Any other discussion, Mike?
Just a friendly amendment and to use a in-stop one.
Yes, it's preference towards. Other questions or discussions on it?
I'm in favor of this, but also Joe Camerata suggested that we monitor speed, so not reasonable suggestion. I mean, again, I don't know how feasible that is to do this season, but yeah, Public Works to monitor speed, particularly on Maple Street, other candidates like Neil and. So.
I think the regional planning commission is.
Yeah, I see reason enough inferred that the regional planning commission can do this, go ahead, Cory.
Where the temporary stop lights, those also somewhere installed, or is that like?
No, those were part of a bridge project. I don't know the cost of that offhand. It was mixed in the context of, $150,000 bridge upgrade.
I'm gonna encourage us to vote on this motion around temporary speed bumps with preference towards in stop. And then we can discuss further if there's further questions on that motion.
With clarification, did that motion include where it would be placed or just in general?
Maple Street.
Thank you.
Thank you from Cheryl, our minute taker, keeping us honest. Any other questions on this? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? All right, so support for temporary speed bump on Maple Street. We had discussion around temporary traffic lights.
Yeah.
Someone's gotta have it. Those construction companies gotta get them from somewhere.
Yeah, they're commonly used in bridge projects, mostly because it's that or pay for flaggers. But I don't know how much the cost would be offhand, and that was all just part of the broader invoices we have. I need to do a little research on that to find out what that would cost to install one or to purchase one.
Or rent one.
If you can just do the research, get back to us.
Yeah, we can do that.
Next meeting.
So the other follow-up items I have for this, was looking around the feasibility of tracking the speed in the area for data collection, which had been noted previously. The Regional Planning Commission can sometimes offer that service, so to reach out about that. And that the municipal manager is gonna come back with more info on temporary traffic light costs and allowance. Does that work?
Yeah, I don't know how it works, because I know they've done a lot of stuff for with counting. They usually get like college kids and they just have a clicker, but that's not gonna solve, you know.
We have technology.
Yeah.
Well, I was just sitting here and looking, and on Amazon, because they have everything. You can actually purchase a handheld radar gun for $150. So that would give, certainly aren't gonna calibrate it, not gonna do anything to the port. So you could just get one and somebody could go out and sporadically at speeds.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. And if folks really go into the archives of the Waterbury Select Board minutes, you'll find a beautiful graph drawn by myself of speeds recorded by Bill Shepelef on Stowe Street going under the bridge. I think with the adult radar that was on the tracks, right, use the sign, yes, and recorded. Yeah, and recorded the speed, so we can certainly do that. I'm so proud of us because we were mostly on speed with the agenda. So is there any major last lingering items on this, or do we feel like we have things for one quick one from Chris?
Yeah.
So I noticed on the other flash there, that your flashing light was crapped out. I don't know if it got shut off or if something wrong with it, but if those are, you know, if those actually work, with that, you put on Maple Street.
Yeah, they get moved around periodically, and I think they're effective for a little bit. And I think people just get used to them.
But Chris is right, one of these, looking at
Okay, that may just be battery, but
because people don't know, they don't know it's connected some way that you're gonna report it or something like that. It's definitely, or
I know, the speeding on. I did have an incident this weekend. Hampshire, and by me and we missed the trailer park turn. And they immediately swung in and they could tell you they weren't there because of the grim. I've been seeing a lot of speeding on Neon Flats and I'm traveling it daily. These,
Awesome. So I have that, we have some next steps on this around right away with the speed bump on Maple, hearing back at our next meeting around temporary traffic lights and reporting for data. And then also a note that we have the ongoing Better Connection study exclusively focused on Waterbury Center, including traffic calming and other more scrutiny. With that, I'm gonna move us on to our next traffic related item, the more stationary, which is specifically parking concerns at the Blush Hill boat launch. I know we have some members of the public interested. I might hazard that our fire chief might have input. Tom, do you have anything you want to preface to kick off?
just that, I think similar to the last item, this has been a persistent and consistent issue. State police have been directed to try to focus on this area, but again, limited ability to do that. So I think any ideas from my perspective would be welcome. I know the residents are frustrated. I know the fire chief has got some ongoing concerns there. Some of the signs were gone this summer and they've been replaced. I think perhaps we can do a little better in terms of the signage. The other piece about Wash Hill is not just parking, but there's also, I think that's also another road where we got a lot of speeding complaints. Maybe not quite the volume as Maple Street, but I think Wash Hill is pretty high on that list.
When we let those potholes get any worse, I don't think there's gonna be much speed involved.
Is there anyone who wants to speak to this?
I would love to.
Yeah,
Alyssa,
please go ahead.
are you talking to me?
Yes, you're all set, Krister, go ahead.
Oh, Chris, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Krister Adams, I live at 2421 Blush Hill Road, probably 250 yards up from the reservoir. And I know I've been a thorn in your side, Tom, and I don't mean to aim it all at you. But I
No,
just,
okay.
I wanted to be heard, you know, and I talk to my neighbors all the time. It's become such a problem. People are parking all over the road, and as you guys all know, it's a fairly narrow dirt road, especially down here. And there is absolutely no way in the universe that ambulance or God forbid a fire truck could make it down past Michigan Avenue when the trailers are parked halfway across the road and whatnot. I mean, without just bombing through and bashing them off to the side. And that's a big scary issue for a lot of us who live down this way. And yes, the speeding for years now has been a big issue. I mean, and I know you guys hear it all the time. You're hearing it about Nealon Flats and Maple Street, and but there are kids and chickens and dogs and babies and people walking on this road all the time, and they're scared. It's not good. And I've lived here 23 years. I could count on my 10 fingers how many times the state police has been up here, and it might not even come past 5 or 6, but anyway, I did chat with a state police gal who was here a couple weeks ago on a Monday morning. It was not a holiday like today, so there was no one there. Now, I was kind of like, "What are you doing here today?" And she said, "Well, we're patrolling the weekends," which I'm sorry. No. So anyway, is there any method to give tickets or do some towing or get people the message?
Thanks, Krista, appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to it? Terry Daly, our fire chief?
Yes, we.
One is on push there a lot, that's Monday through Friday. See a problem. Six.
So Chris is not wrong. It's a huge issue. But it's not the only place. Waterbury had an ordinance problem. We have ordinances, but there is no enforcement. And the only way you're gonna get people to change their behavior is to make them feel uncomfortable. And that simply could be tone. And you can't keep going out and giving warnings, because that's not uncomfortable to the person that is breaking the rules. When they're parking in front of a sign that says no parking, they don't care. So until people are made to feel uncomfortable, those people will not change their behavior. It's up on Blush Hill. Try going by the school with a fire truck. You can't do it when it's school let out time. And I hear all the time, well, it's only for a half hour. I don't care how long it is. People start getting into school an hour ahead of time because they gotta beat the next vehicle. They park on High Street where it says no parking, but they don't feel uncomfortable. And in the evenings, although it's much better, the school has done a pretty good job of telling people not to park in certain places. The majority of them listen, but it's the ones that don't mind that thought that they might get towed because they're not going to. So until we have ordinances that are going to be enforced, and tickets don't stop the problem. If you've got people that are parked in a manner on Blush Hill, and you just give a ticket, that does not solve the immediate problem. The immediate problem is access. So you have to create the access. And that means towing. And I get that it's people in Waterbury, they come here, they go down and vote, or they come from all over the area. And they're not going to change their behavior because of a sign. They're going to change behavior because they knew somebody had to park their vehicle and trailer towed. We had people parking in front of the fire stations, in front of the bays, in front of the doors. I towed 3 vehicles in 2 weeks. We don't have that problem because people understand that their car is going to get towed. And then you have to pay the towing fee and the impound fee to get your vehicle back. So until we make it uncomfortable for these people that don't care, because it is quality of life that we're talking about. It's quality of life and it's life safety. We have to make it feel uncomfortable for the people that don't mind breaking the rules.
I have a logistics question, I don't know if I'm gonna answer. Can you tow a vehicle with a trailer?
Sure.
I just figured. I remember that.
You might certainly struggle to turn it around on that road.
You wouldn't be able to come down Stowe Street and turn onto Main Street. Going down South Main because people park in those lined out areas, which is another ongoing issue. Again, people will continue to do things until they're made to feel uncomfortable.
Thank you, appreciate it. Kate, I see you have a hand up?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have phrased it the way Gary did, but I don't think he's wrong. I mean, he's not the first resident of Waterbury to say ordinance without enforcement isn't an ordinance. I have witnessed the happenings on Blush Hill, trying to fish down there on a holiday. Holy cow. It is a problem. The locals aren't wrong. I have some follow-up questions for Tom. Who do we contract for towing and where are cars impounded?
Oh geez, I forget the name offhand because
Bob's.
I only deal with it twice a year, but yeah, Bob's.
And they go to the pool.
And we don't do a lot of towing in the winter.
But we have towed during winter, no parking.
Yeah, we tow during the winter. It's not, I wouldn't say that we're very aggressive about it. We certainly don't enforce the ordinance, at least since I've been here, when there's no snow.
I agree 100% with Darren, because I have gotten so upset with people, and I talk to people, say, you know, they park in the places where you need to turn your boat around and they don't care. And I said, I call the state police. But until something happens, and I don't know, tickets are one thing, but towing is gonna really get people's attention. And it's only gonna take a few tows before, you know, I know someone like me, I'm pretty responsible. I know pull way to the side, as I know that's a thoroughfare. But I think we need to post those no parking signs with, in addition, will be towed. Change it. And I think that's gonna, you know, people, if they think the threat is there of towing versus I'm just gonna get a ticket, they say, well, I'll just take the chance of getting a summons. And they're probably not as concerned, but if it's towing now is an expensive problem. And probably $400.
But that's passed on to the person that got towed.
Right, we don't pay anything for that.
They Bob's or, you know, a towing service, is that a cost to
No.
us?
No.
No.
They have the call.
Okay, so then. Just thinking through this logistically, I mean, we would need to post that towing would happen, but I mean, that can just be like a small little addition to the site that's already in existence. And then, so then would a resident call into us and say, hey, call a tow service?
So with
or would they-
our winter parking ban, it's not anyone can call in. He takes orders from Public Works.
So if we didn't start towing.
I shouldn't say that entirely. We'll call about a problem vehicle. Beginning of the season, first periods of inclement weather, try to post on Front Porch Forum. But then we do just tell him, beginning of the season, hit it pretty hard, and generally people get the message. So maybe we need to do the same at Blush Hill, especially next spring, to say,
Yeah. I'm gonna do that. Put that sign.
Could we potentially. Yeah, we put the sign up, we put it on Front Porch Forum. Is it possible for that towing company to begin enforcing all of our or parking ordinance is effective as soon as you will be towed signs are posted.
Provided that's consistent with the ordinance, yeah.
Just dig into the ordinance and see what gets you towed.
I'll add that. And I emailed Mike today to ask if he.
So in general, I'm hearing increased support from the select board for contracting and looking into more towing, exploring what's legally required to do that around posting. And then as feasible, implementing more strict enforcement for towing, specifically for this flush out area, but also generally as well. Questions, comments, concerns around that proposed action from the board?
But just one more comment. I just think the show situation is certainly an issue. And I think if we have the ability to tow, start doing it like effective immediately. Because we're still gonna get heavy traffic down there during foliage too. It's not just a summer thing. But for any parking ordinance that is punishable by towing, I think we should pursue. Because, I mean, Gary's also not wrong about Stowe Street and the school, right? We have people violating parking ordinances. As soon as one or two cars disappear to the impound, I think a lot of that's gonna quell.
Okay, we'll have an interesting, I think, start to the season too with 51 South Main no longer available. I think that's gonna create a bit of a pinch for a few people, but we'll see how that plays out in real time.
Listen.
Yep, one note from Chris, but first I would say my other implementation is just checking Tom. It sounds like if state police is already there, just checking around their ability. It sounds like this is particularly a weekend issue and just stating that. If public works is not working on a weekend, and if state troopers have the ability to be the ones to say, hi, it looks really bad, that feels useful. Chris, and then we gotta move on.
I'm wondering if we're missing the point here. I think we pride ourselves in the fact that people use reservoir. You start telling them. It's obvious there is not an alternative here, right? Yeah. It's a bad behavior. I think some people just park. That I understand. If there's parking and they just choose to park somewhere where it's not convenient for them not to park, then they should be towed. But if the problem is no parking, period, and you've got an overabundance of people that want to visit, you start towing people, they're gonna say, you know what? We want here to park. Some other town where they're.
They can go to one of the other.
Well, I guess my question is there alternative parking?
Well, there's alternative boat launches.
Yeah.
There's two.
There it is. So launch your boat, then what do you do with your rig?
At the dam, there's a overflow parking area down below the dam. It's got plenty of room. So you can go down there. It's a walk.
Well, I thought we were talking about Blush Hills.
We are, but yeah, Blush Hill is tight. It's got limited capacity. Regularly on the weekends, overly fast.
So I wonder why people are choosing to migrate to that area as opposed to going to the dam or to the Davis area. Great.
Two reasons. One is you don't have to pay. Two, it's closer.
So there's, and I know state owns property there and they are unwilling to do anything.
No, they did, they put in a big,
They did.
I think it was Green Mountain Power, but maybe it was state involved too, but they did put in a 6-unit area for trailers. But, you know, 6 out of each with cars.
You don't have to pay it for that.
Right. It's true.
No, but you do have to pay at Waterbury Center.
Start charging them. They will flush you all down.
All right, Mike, last comment, and then I'm gonna move on.
How do we deal with, because there's a certain area that's not our jurisdiction, it's right by Blush Hill for the access is Green Mountain Power. Preview, we don't have. We own, I think, past where the turnaround is, I think that's where the town land stuff.
I think let the people that get towed try to figure that out.
But the towns, those are town signs, aren't they?
Those are
Right, the
town
town
signs.
sign is like past the turnaround. I think that's where our right of way starts.
So always reach out to me.
Yeah.
Anyone else from the board have questions or concerns moving forward? I think naming that this is one of multiple access points, perhaps. Signage indicating the other access points might be useful, but for now, where is clearly our jurisdiction and folks are blatantly ignoring posted signs and like to enforce things.
Right.
Right. With that, I will move on to our next item, which is CDBGR or Community Development Block Grants Disaster Recovery. Application updates and grant writer approval. I will say before we start that the next 3 agenda items of Stanley Watson, Randall Meadow, and Woody Ave are the 3 potential component projects for that application. So there will be time to comment on all of those. This is really a time for Tom, I guess, upfront to give an update on the application as a whole, and then specifically there's a board request around grant writing.
So the application as a whole, for Randall Meadow, we made a decision to jointly sorry. Not Randall Meadow, for the broader Waterbury hydrology study we've been seeking funding to do for some time. That would be submitted in concert with the Regional Planning Commission, and they would be the lead applicant, which we think makes sense operationally because they've got other requests for hydrology work along the broader Winooski in the region. It also makes things administratively easier to not administer multiple grants. That's a relatively easy lift, I think, for them too, because we have an entire BRIC grant that was written earlier this year, and BRIC is no longer a program. But the grant application was written so we can give them oodles of information essentially ready to go. The other 2 that have been approved for pre-applications are Stanley Watson and Randall Meadow. The state has really encouraged every applicant to get a grant writing team put together just because CDBG money is HUD money. There's a lot of complexities that go with both applying and administering for those funds. So Dana Allen has been super helpful and done a lot of yeoman's work to help find consultants who can do this in the short term. We have proposals from 5. I believe 5 right now, and potentially we'll have a couple more tomorrow. Proposals run in the range of $10,000 per grant application, and we're looking at 2. We do have not anything signed, sealed, and delivered yet, but we do believe we have access to grant funds called Ready Funds, which Alyssa can explain in more detail than I can. But it's a $7,500 matching grant. But it appears to me the need will be about $20,000 to get these done with, I think, the level of professionalism that we need. So I believe the net would be about 12.5. I think without that funds, we can submit applications. I just don't think they're going to be quite as competitive. And with Randall Meadow, we're asking for the full amount, 3.8 million roughly. And for Stanley Watson, we didn't finalize the amount yet, but the pre-application, we tried to estimate some of municipal costs that could be put into that lot to build a new building and perhaps do some other infrastructure associated. And so we estimated that at about $750,000. So from a cost benefit perspective, if we get one of the grants and there's a $12,500 local cost to it, money pretty well spent. I think the state's pretty enthusiastic about both projects. I think we've had the same conversation about Randall Meadow as we've had as it pertains to FEMA funds, which is it's not that it's a bad project, it's an awesome project because there's a lot of flood relief, but it's not in the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively expensive project too. So that may be a little bit more of a challenge, but I think they're both strong applications. And I think internally we need the help to get these done and really be competitive.
Thanks, Tom. Can you clarify what, if any, action you need from the board tonight with regards to these training services?
So we did not budget to in our professional services line items to hire these consultants, so we need to essentially spend the money with the understanding we're gonna go over budget on those line items and hopefully make it back in terms of a grant award.
Do you want a motion to that regard from the board? Just,
I do want a motion to that regard. I also want to note that the adopted budget had, I believe, 612,500 in local option taxes that would be spent. The legislature passed a bill this year that was signed into law that would allow us to keep a little more of the local option tax. That bumps up from 70% of every penny collected, every dollar collected, to 75%, and that goes into effect the last quarter of the year. Doesn't impact the person paying, but we get a little more of it, and we're doing really great through the first half of this year. So I would expect that this year we're going to collect probably in the range of $800,000 in taxes. I know everyone is concerned about the impact of Canadian tourists, but at least for the first 2 quarters of the year, it hasn't impacted our numbers. Are still up from prior years. So that, long way of saying that we will certainly be in a surplus position on a net basis at the end of the year.
I see Mike and then Roll.
I make a motion to approve $20,000 for 2 grant applications for grant writers to apply for 2 grant applications for community development block grant.
Motion by Mike, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Kane. Rogers, did you have a comment or questions? All right, is there any further question or discussion? So just noting, we heard from the municipal manager, we anticipate more local option tax revenue than was budgeted, and then also just the 7,500 rural economic development initiative grant funds seem likely, so in hopes the actual spend would be closer to 12 to 13,000 as opposed to 20 because of that further funding. Okay,
Question, just in case. So we've authorized to spend this money, and having the money authorized makes us competitive in the grant pool.
Yes, I believe so. And worked with HUD money quite a bit in the past. HUD money is, I think, both challenging to apply for and administer, certainly compared to FEMA money.
and I guess one other clarification, Tom, we can build in some of the administering into the fund to apply for, is that correct?
That's correct.
So if we were to get an award, we can build for that, we think so, right away. Other questions or clarification? All right, all those.
Sorry, just for the minutes, the 2 are for, I think you said Stanley Wasson, but I thought it was Woody Avenue.
Stanley Wasson and sorry, not Stanley Wasson, Randall Meadow and Woody Avenue. Yeah. The agenda had me confused for a minute.
Are we good? Any questions? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? All right, motion passed, and that will bring us down to more detail. So next up, we have the Stanley Walking Development. I put it on the agenda, so I would say it correctly this time. Request for qualifications, updates. It's an opportunity for us to get more input from folks and talk about next steps. I will once again turn it back over to Tom in terms of any updates. And just note, we had, I think, questions due August 29th on this.
Yep, and we did get questions from one developer. Nothing major, more points of clarifications. One question, for example, was the developer is gonna own the buildings post-construction. They might need an office for their property management team. And how does that pertain to our zoning and housing issues that we're looking at? So I think relatively some minor issues to clarify, and as I specified in the RFP, those questions will be written down and answered and put on the website for any developer to look at and see, and I'll do that pretty early this week. Also want to note, and she is here, but I did meet with the immediate neighbor to the site. And just talked about some of her concerns related to it, and I think from that perspective, I got a good education on. I think learned a lot about what's going on even right now that I wasn't necessarily aware of. And just talked about a public process going forward and how that might look. You know, I think the thorny issue here is the select board on its own legal authority can buy and sell land. Doesn't mean it's advisable to do it without telling your public, obviously. So really, it's up to you how you want to engage there. The other challenge is when you're dealing with developers and proposals, there's a certain amount of that process that you know is really subject to negotiation, and so that's not necessarily public, at least at the very beginning.
Any other, or?
That is the big update. And from the state's perspective, just to go backwards, one quick agenda item. They were not enthusiastic about this project from a CDBG DR perspective, just because the way the RFP was written is it wasn't a primary focus on seniors or lower income housing, and that's really the CDBG component there. And so they essentially said there's other funding opportunities. Something I've mentioned in the past to this board is there's potential financing programs that would allow us to tap into some public dollars that could be used for public improvements on the site, and that's a pretty broad definition of public improvements. So we've talked, for example, and put in the RFP about a public park in a corner of the lot, and so there could be sources for those things. One of those programs is called CHIP, that was passed this year, the last legislative session. State has not yet published the rules about things like applying and administering the program, so we're not quite there, but I can see that program or even the TIF program being a part of this development, because there's some pretty substantial public dollars that could be available to the town to leverage some other site improvements that would be a benefit for everyone. So I think more on that later.
Questions or comments from select board members to start?
How many? So you said we had one developer ask a question. How many developers have thrown their hat in?
Won't know until they apply or ask questions, but it's been put out there. There's a listserv, there's a Vermont development listserv that I think is pretty widely read. It's been put out on a bunch of public places for bidding. And so I think the development world has access to it.
Deadline is end of next month.
End of September.
So
Yes.
Proposals are due by 4:30 on Friday, September 26th. Other questions from the board? I'll name one of the pieces of feedback we got is, will anyone even respond to this? So again, we'll answer that definitively after that, but we have at least one person who says a question. And then we have discussion of next step and process, which I think on this briefing. I guess I'll pause for a moment and see if there's public input or questions at this point. Yeah. I'll start. Do you want to start and then go back? And I'll say I've done a bad job and I'm sorry. Use your name, Maureen.
My name is Peter Mertz. Me and my family live directly next to the state. Property abuts the site on two sides, so the decisions you make here affect us more directly. When the river rose during July 2023 flood, we personally witnessed this parcel. It functioned as storage capacity for nearby homes and ours. And if you fill this land with high density buildings, the floodwater does not hold it. Water will be displaced and will end up in our yards, basements, and I've heard some say that this parcel doesn't flood. With respect, that is simply not true. I was there, I saw the water rise up from the river. And fill half of our backyard and nearly reach our. If the town ignores the flooding, then it is ignoring not only FEMA's NFI requirements, but also Waterbury's own hazard mitigation plan, which promises that new development will not increase the risk to the. I'm not opposed to housing, but I am opposed to development that puts my family and my home and my neighbors in harm's way. Please require a full hydrologic and hydraulic study before you allow anything forward with the developer, and please recognize that this site within the flood fringe is not safe for high density.
Good evening. My name is Karen McMillan. I also reside at 28 Park Row, which abuts Stanley Watson parcel on two sides. Tom, thank you so much for coming to our home and property and walking through the neighborhood with me, so you understand kind of the dynamics and the family-friendly homes that are on the end of Randall, on that side. I was notified of the opportunity to speak tonight, by Sandy Saban. Thank you very much. There was no public outreach to any of the neighbors, to come and speak tonight. I reached out to as many of them as I possibly could. But within such short notice, being a holiday weekend, most of them with very young children, they're not able to be here tonight. I see a few of them online, and I'm happy that they're able to. And what I did was prepare a statement to read, copies for everyone. I've also prepared a community fact sheet for our neighbors that don't quite understand exactly what's happening. They have been following the project, but they do not know how fast this is moving or the consequences to their property. After tonight and tomorrow and this week, they will completely understand them. So thank you again for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate your ongoing commitment to addressing the housing needs in Waterbury. I also respect the difficulty of balancing urgent housing need concerns with long-term community resilience. This issue is not whether Waterbury needs housing. We do. The issue is where we are going to build it, how quickly this process is moving for the Stanley Watson site, and the lack of engagement with the buffers and neighbors about the site specifics. The proposed housing development on the Stanley Watson site is not in the floodplain. However, it is in the flood fringe, an area designated as a special flood hazard area that has historically flooded. The RFQ issued on August 5th, 2025 to potential developers called for experience to construct in a floodplain. This phrasing is overly broad and does not reflect the stricter requirements for development in a mapped special flood hazard area. Developers must be prepared for FEMA, ANR, and Act 250 compliance, not just general floodplain experience. Elevating first floors and building flood resilient buildings in special flood hazard areas only protects the building and structure itself. If the developer's site design displaces water, reduces storage, increases elevation with fill, neighbors will experience an increase in flooding. It is imperative for developers to consider SFHA requirements and for the town to inform a developer prior to any purchase agreements are in place to ensure the safety of our community. Additionally, the removal of state buildings in 2021 helped to create a green space. That space functioned as flood storage in July of 2023, absorbing water that might otherwise have entered neighboring homes. Filling or building on this area removes that protection. Furthermore, stating the Stanley Watson site will create an array of housing options for residents and relocation for opportunities in the RFQ is undermining our own town municipal plan goals and hazard mitigation plan that was adopted in 2024. The hazard mitigation plan clearly states, and I quote, increased severe rain events are expected, buyouts are reducing risk, and updated zoning and FIP, National Flood Insurance Program compliance, should prevent increasing the risk of the community of any new development. Approving new development within the mapped special flood hazard area directly conflicts with the town's mitigation strategy, Instead of reducing risk, it concentrates more people and infrastructure in the floodplain while displacing green space that currently absorbs water and slows the flow. The Waterbury Housing Task Force lists a goal that housing should be safe, decent, and affordable, and should be located in areas that maintain neighborhood integrity, respects the natural environment, and minimizes infrastructure. I specifically request the following. The select board and town manager inform all prospective developers of the SFHA requirements for federal, state, and municipal obligations tied to Waterbury's hazard mitigation plan and the FIP participation, including the FEMA and FIP requirements, Vermont Agency of Natural Resource, River Corridor, and Flood Hazard Area Rules, Act 250 criterion regarding the floodways and flood hazard areas. Number 2, inform the developer of previous flooding and water flows at the site. 3, publish the selected developer's proposal and engage neighbors and abutters for their feedback and schedule a special meeting to review with the public. 4, commission phase 2 and 3 environmental studies addressing flood storage loss, stormwater, and infrastructure capacity, and require these to be complete before any property transfer. Before any or development contract is finalized. Publish those phase 2 and 3 environmental studies for community feedback. The town reaffirmed its NFIP compliance obligations, particularly the requirement that development as SFHAs must not increase flood heights or redirect floodwaters onto neighboring properties. And number 7, and lastly, consider alternative sites better aligned with the hazard mitigation and smart growth principles. We can and should pursue housing solutions that are safe, resilient, and aligned with Waterbury's mitigation strategy. Approving a new development in a special flood hazard area does the opposite. It places both new and existing residents at greater risk, that jeopardizes our NFIP compliance. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much.
I will leave this here.
Is there anyone else here, or anyone online who wants to add? I don't see any hands online, but if you have to just unmute, go for it. Awesome. Anyone else in the room? Members? Oh, I'll turn it back to the select board. Questions, comments, updates from the board in light of these public comments and just generally with next steps.
Hi, I'm sorry. Can I weigh in from online? I had a little trouble unmuting.
Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, so this is Wayne Quillen. I eventually will be a resident on Randall Street sometime down the road after a little more construction. And I appreciate Carrie carrying the water on this in terms of the concerns about flooding in the Stanley Wasson site. I live in Africa at the moment and my power went off, so I missed the first part of Tom's comments. And I was wondering, in terms of the funding for which the Stanley Wasson site is not eligible because it doesn't include funding for seniors, full disclosure, I'm 67, funding for senior housing or low-income housing. I have tried to tune in to as many of the select board meetings as possible, but I've missed why there was no consideration in the RFP for the site for senior housing or low-income housing.
Peter, can you hear me? Oh, sorry, Wayne.
Yeah, loud and clear, thanks.
So the grant application really as a primary component, if it's going to fund housing, has to focus primarily on lower income individuals according to the HUD definition, or seniors, or both. And the way the RFP was written, that certainly was a component, but it wasn't necessarily the leading component. And so from the state's perspective, they thought that it wouldn't be a strong application, so they didn't support it. Doesn't mean that those wouldn't or couldn't be components of the project at all. I thought the RFP was clear in that there was support for that amongst the select board. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Yes, thanks.
Sure.
back to the discussion at hand on this. I guess I'll just say, in terms of our meeting date, which we've already received comments on, I put this to the full select board and we all decided to meet tonight, and it's one of many meetings, so I'll just name, I certainly don't think this is the first or only time we'll discuss this, and there's likely gonna be a lot moving forward. I also don't wanna get over my skis because I'm not the town zoning administrator and don't know it offhand, but I will just say we have things like special flood hazard area regulations, the National Flood Insurance Program. I think last I checked, we are at like level 8, that actually gives all homeowners in town a 10% discount on their flood insurance. It requires us to do things like require certificates of completion in the zoning area, and I'll say personally, and as select board chair, I have no desire to have us not be in. Like, next steps, I mean, deadlines we have, obviously, we're not gonna have any responses until the 26th. I think we've heard feedback from a number of folks around what the vetting process will look like, should there be an advisory group, professionals weighing in, making proposals public. And they're all fair and good questions, and just wondering how we outline this together with ourselves and the public.
I'll go first. I have no issue with making proposals public. Doesn't seem like there are any. But when they do start coming in, there's no reason not to. Some of the issues raised by the neighbors. About floodwater disbursement. I'm not a developer. So I can't speak to how they do or do not do buildings in floodplains. It was mentioned in the RFQ. And I think anyone who sends a proposal or a question is probably going to bring up that subject. We're, 99% likely to end up in a conversation about floodplain management with whoever this developer may be. And we can definitely include comments from the neighbors in those discussions.
Want to respond. I know there are some significant concerns about floodplains. I agree with them in a lot of ways, but there are ways to build within floodplains that still will minimize any kind of risk, which would be elevating the buildings where the only thing you might have are posts, so there's no development on a first floor level. That's something that you see frequently. If you look at down street housing, they built where the bus station. That's all kind of elevated, because that's all in the floodplain. I think you might see something similar to that, on the Stanley Watson site. So I like to look at all creative ideas and what we can do with that site versus just say, no, don't develop it at all. I think there are ways to develop within floodplains that do make it safe, not only for the specific site, but for the.
And if I may, when I met with Carrie, something she said that really did resonate with me is that she said, hey, if the town is going to get new housing and new tax revenue, that maybe the standard of building in the floodplain, essentially the standard in really basic layman's terms is you can't make it worse for anyone. But part of her point was, if you're getting all this new tax revenue, maybe you can do better than that. And, I thought she's not wrong. And so maybe there is a way to accomplish that with some of the resources that we would get. I'm not sure that's easy. I'm not sure about the economic feasibility of that, but I've just really begun to think about it from that perspective too.
I'd also tack on, when it comes to the floodplain, that very soon, and according to Vermont state law, Randall Meadows is ours. And so should we have to push ahead on a project without grants. It would be incredibly costly, but I wouldn't stand in opposition to continuing to do a project on that space to bring down floodwater levels with or without grants. I think it needs to be done regardless of the city property got close to flooding but didn't flood. And if we can manage Randall Meadow effectively, then even with development on Stanley Watson, you'd either be, depending on flood, I can't predict floodwater levels, but it would greatly reduce risk moving forward, regardless of the development on the site or not. So I think we are pursuing both things, right? We're pursuing these two things at once, and it does beg the question, do we need to speed up timelines on Randall Meadow in anticipation of this project?
I think in terms of the CDBG-DR, that grant is due at the end of the month.
Yeah.
I don't have an exact date to get back to. My impression is that's a fairly quick answer from the state in terms of yes or no. FEMA is entirely unclear to me. But I guess I'd say that if I would expect by the time the warning is put together that we'll have reasonable clarity on both of those things. And so if the desire is to pay for it regardless, we should have that information before us in I think 4 to 5 months.
Roger?
Yeah, I think we should do a better job of engaging the public, and I'll admit that I haven't done as good a job as probably I should. We've been pursuing this property for housing for 2 years, and that's not a secret. It hasn't gone through. We don't really know why. I don't know why it's taken the state so long to transfer it. But part of it is finding somebody willing to pay the money, because the town doesn't want to be on the hook for $400,000 without a buyer. And purchasing this money and putting it directly onto the taxpayers. But I suggest that we take a look at what Carrie has presented to us and keep this on the agenda. And maybe we should have a special meeting at the firehouse so that we can get adequate warning out there in advance and make it more accessible to Randall and Park Row residents so that we can have a more thorough discussion about this.
I'm gonna shamelessly follow up on that as the meeting scheduler in chief, and just to name, I'm gonna force that for an issue for the board. I see a hand up, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to also acknowledge that flooding is not the only issue that a lot of the neighborhood has. It's just the most important one when it comes to floodwaters and damage that it can cause to our nearby homes. And I recognize that there are mitigation strategies out there right now that reduce the flood level and not stop it. So just to put that out there, but a lot of the neighbors have major concerns about infrastructure, the backup of sewer water into their basement in July of 2028. Floodwaters did not reach like the homes there at the top of Randall. The sewage backed up into their basements and completely filled it. The storm drains overflowed, contributing to all of that water. They're concerned about those items greatly. They're also concerned greatly about traffic and the flow of like where are all these people gonna go? Are they all coming out onto Randall and Park Row? You're talking about like multi-buildings. We've got a lot of traffic that's going to be out there. Can that area really handle that capacity? The sewer line, even on Park Row, and I'm not sure the direction where the developer is directly, but that's 120 years old. And it's made with clay tile. It's already failed twice on 2 of the houses on Park Row. I mean, there are some bigger infrastructure issues that people are concerned about. And then they're also concerned about the police presence. And I'm sure they'll be concerned about parking, because I know we don't have to give a parking space for everybody, but that means where are all these people gonna park? And they're currently used for parking for a lot of the neighbor businesses as well, they're all the way. So there's a lot of concerns, not just about flooding, and I think that everyone would greatly appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this. Not just at a select board meeting with me representing and just pushing the biggest issue that I feel is.
Well, on that note, Roger has proposed it, and again, as the board often does meeting schedule, I'm curious from the board around if we want to do this, do we want to? So I'll say we have a scheduled meeting the 15th, we have a scheduled meeting on the month, which is the 29th. Next Monday, the 8th is only a week away, and we have planning commission input on housing in this room from 6 to 8 p.m. Do folks want to do a Monday? Do folks want to do another day? Roger proposed the fire station. Obviously, one meeting doesn't need to be the be all end all, but I guess I'll push. Do we want to do anything prior to our meeting on the 15th, Roger?
I was gonna suggest maybe the 29th. Close the open sessions for the any developers interested. And publish the results, share the results. Like gives ample time to go more in the meeting, see if the fire station's open. Amenable to that suggestion.
Other questions or input, Kate?
I would say if we're gonna do the 29th, and then we just wanna, if. We just dedicate that meeting to this topic. I don't see why we shouldn't. It's a fifth Monday, is it not?
It is a good one.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think it's totally feasible to dedicate a fifth Monday to this one specific topic.
Other questions or input from the board? I guess I'll name for me personally, not as chair, I do feel a little bit like, after the fact, this is all done, we're taking input, and I'm curious about, I mean, at a minimum, it's like we're on 15. I mean, the RFQ is out, so I recognize we're not gonna make substantive proposals, but I'm curious if there's any info that would be helpful.
Well, the RFQ is not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Has the big boys returned to which yet, and if not, I've heard rumor that
November.
3 days a week.
So I'm hearing from the board that we decided to do this on the 29th. Dean Sweeney will be running this meeting, I will be away, so I will likely, given the topic, try and attend on Zoom on my only vacation of the year, but and that is the board's will, so we will do it at 6:30 p.m. on the.
We could move it to October, listen.
No, I wanna support what's best for Waterbury, and I think the board has supported the timeline now, as the last speaker being up front of my own personal availability. Joe has a hand up.
I mean, just saying on the 29th, your RFP process is going to close with your began, you're giving yourself really no time at all to prepare any kind of information for the public. Just you might want to consider giving some time to, you know, digest what was said and then have a presentation for the public to understand. But
If I heard if I'm right, so.
oh, I'm sorry, I thought I heard you.
But that's a Friday.
Right.
Then you get on Monday to work on it, so. Do you wanna move it back a week? Or 2 weeks, rather, or it would be one. Yeah. To the stuff. Fixed.
When, do we have to make a decision on these guys?
I think we left that very open-ended on purpose.
I don't push it to versus 6, and that gives everybody, like, we release the RFPs for the public to like look at and see it really, we can digest it. And then we talk about it on 6.
I'm amenable to that. The silence buttons on the left side of, states.
So hearing from the board, specific meeting. Personal thanks to me on October 6th at 6:30 p.m. But notice have 2 more select board meetings prior as well. And we'll have this on the agenda. Any other comments or notes we want to make in terms of tonight's meeting content before we move on?
And start getting word out. Those it's to.
Brandon Park Road.
Yeah, we can do that. Should we include Elm? Because the reality is, if you consider state employees coming back to work in a development, would you, just thinking far ahead, would you consider? It's already tough at times to take a left out of Elm, but those folks naturally head towards the light.
We'll be discussing it on October 6th and. Bids will be available for review. Next day, if they want to look at it in the meeting.
It's almost like an ERB application, you send notices to all the, butters and stuff like that. The rest will go by.
This is just in time for it to go in the September newsletter. Period. So I can be very, I can make space for that. Thank you. Yeah.
There's also some people along that short little street, Warren Court, yes, so.
I'll suggest that we use the town's personal map viewer that a radius that includes up to Elm Street and everyone else on the property. Unless we would be upset about where there's something that's really included. I'm also including South Main too, if it's relevant. So we have the technology for DRB or others. Agree?
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just gonna say, I think the neighbors, the neighborhoods that. Would have to look at a development. You need to talk to the most.
Agreed. Specific meeting October 6th and also having it on both of the next select board meetings, which I think we could also include. Sure. Anything else from anyone?
When we get those proposals from them. Is there a way to let them know that it will be public, so they can react to the information that's today?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other board questions of boards? Oops, sorry.
I just, as far as public, you're just talking about, you're gonna put it in the same general places, but it is not for a regular meeting or. Just on that website or put it like some board forum and all of that, so more people.
Great notes about front porch forum and other methods of getting the word out in addition to the basic legal notice that we always do. Does that seem workable? Any question or further direction we need from the board?
No, I think that seems workable.
All right, we will continue on to our next item in the abutting area on Randall Meadow updates. We'll start with Tom and acknowledge that there was a National Park Service visit and again, what are next steps were.
Yep, so we had a kickoff meeting with National Park Service. Myself, Roger, representing Revitalizing Waterbury. Crew was represented, Danny Kelman as a natural disaster preparedness coordinator was there, a few other folks. Mike Dacey with crew. Good to walk through with all the Park Service staff and Mike Bard. My mind's still on camping out. Good to walk through the site with the National Park Service staff and to get to know the staff better and their project manager who will be on this one. And really the focus of their project is on visioning potential future uses for the site. Once the project is completed. Since then, we've talked about, we've had a flurry of emails. Roger's been a big part of that about how we want to engage the public as part of that process, because heretofore it's just been us really internally brainstorming some ideas, but the thought has been that we need some sort of a public process here to just to get a broader broader buy-in from the public, but also just get that broader range of ideas that we may not be thinking of. And interestingly enough, there were a few new ones that I'd heard for the first time at that walkthrough. So I think I lead the board with that thought that we want to, I think, just get some better engagement here.
But Roger wrote an excellent summary of what happened at the meeting. I think, yes, the National Park Service is looking mostly at what the future outcomes are gonna be, and I 100% agree that the public needs to be invested in what's gonna happen to that Randall Meadow site. You know, there are some existing uses out there, some trails and stuff like that, people who access the river. You know, but I think in a very strategic way, the public, we as a small group have ideas, and I think there were some good ones presented, but we're not the whole community, and I think the public needs to be, involved in that process. So I think that, that's really the first step that we have to do, in addition to all the funding opportunities. But I think it needs to be concerned if we do invite the public, if we're gonna have to put in a greater share of monies, that the public is gonna definitely want to be involved in that decision. So, like you said.
Yeah, let's note that we're just one of 5 municipalities that they are visiting and looking to include in this visioning and planning process along the Winooski watershed. But I do think that there's some likelihood that we will get included and that this will go forward over the course of the next 2 years. And happy to share the recap that I put together as part of the minutes for this meeting.
Is there other next steps anyone wants to propose or define, or other questions? I'll note, so again, we've named this as one of the CDBG PR applications that's going in, so that's one thing. We do have. I'll put up the news and initiatives page on the town website from Minnesota under flood mitigation. I think, my understanding was we just wanted to flag that this is another thing that we need to go out and gather more public input on. And just acknowledge this because that happened, but that there's a lot more to be done. Does it feel like there's any other action we need right on this? The next step someone wants to do?
I have some clarifying questions. The first. What were you on about trails? Like,
There are some.
yes, there are. And the National Park Service ones should make trails.
No, I'm not saying that, just saying that they know that they exist, and if you have change in use, what's gonna happen?
Sure.
I think for orientation, maybe, and thank you, King, because this is good. The National Park Service, this is a technical assistance thing, so they can come in and say, hey, we do this federally for the entire country, and you have a parcel of land, and here's things you might consider. I think Mike is naming that, the existence of the Cross Vermont Trail and other things on this parcel is one such consideration.
Correct.
Yeah, I can mention a few others. One is improved river access for people who like to launch kayaks, stand up paddle boards.
This is all post bulldozer. Potentially.
Yeah, well, the bulldozer is gonna take a while to. And so this is sort of, this could be incorporated process, the planning process of what types of recreational amenities could be incorporated into the flood mitigation planning process.
Yeah. And then comment about public input. The whole reason that we've been talking about Randall Meadow for 2 straight years is because the residents of that neighborhood lobbied us so hard that we kept it on every agenda since July of 2023. So when it comes to public input, this is what that neighborhood wanted. Was to begin work on this project. What are we talking about?
National Park Service is really not focused on the lowering the land. They're focused on how does it look when it's done? How do we lower the land but make it more of a community amenity than it is? You know, right now there's the Cross Vermont Trail there. There's not really good river access. And so are there ways we can improve both those things? And if we're gonna invite floodwater, does the trail even work? So there's a whole lot of concepts to explore there, and there's some different, I think, creative ideas that a few bubbled to the surface at the meeting, and I think there's probably some more out there that we could think of. So this is really not just about lowering the land, but it's about how do we make this an asset to the community as part of that.
And perfect, or we'll revisit it for more detail. I'll just name maybe this is the preemptive version of a previous agenda item, so people are not saying, whoa, I would have loved the boat access and no one ever asked and we didn't contact the neighbors or the rec committee or the community. Or putting that on the record publicly. All right, I'm gonna move up to the next one, which is update on potential Woody Ave development. So this is again municipal land owned out behind Brookside Primary School and what's now called Woody Ave. I know we're waiting on some info on this, so I guess Tom would love to.
So we have the borings that are done, which gave us the information we need to design the building. So we've been told by Alec, our engineer, and John Grenier that building design should be done about the end of this week. And so once that's done, we'll have think better, you know, we have the start of the ability to cost out the actual project. The other piece, and I want to make sure I say this so no one jumps the gun and thinks we're doing anything, but the building is full of a lot of junk. And so we're gonna just start as a first order, putting a bunch of stuff out to the curb. As a second order, we're gonna probably order a couple dumpsters. So we're just gonna clean it out. Doesn't mean that we're doing the project, but the building needs to be cleaned up regardless, so we're gonna start there too. But it's got, you know how these things go. It's just got years worth of storage. But we should have by the end of the meeting a building design that we can then get some numbers on for construction. So that's all built into the CDBGR piece. The whole concept is, can we get the grant funds to pay for the public improvements on the site that we'll need?
Questions? Sorry, I see two, I see Chris and Joe, and then we'll go back to the board.
Not that I have to guess, but,
Wait, you need to come to the front. Sorry.
I'm just curious to know. Curious to know what the soil samples are.
15 feet of clay. Not a shock, right?
I just wanted to make sure that I was connecting the dots correctly from here in the meeting, earlier in the meeting. You had talked about Woody Avenue being one of the grant proposals. Community block development grant, that's recovered. Later on, when Wayne asked a question about Stanley Washington, he said that wasn't potential for the grant because income housing, senior or low income housing wasn't included as a primary major focus. So does that mean then, if I'm correct, that for Woody Avenue, that will be the focus?
That would have to be to be grant eligible. So that's part of the process that we're working on is looking at some options for that site and having some more casual conversations with developers. A lot of interest, particularly in senior housing there. I think it's a good site for that, given it's got sidewalks. I mean, we need new sidewalks, but it's got sidewalks at least on High Street. So it's been part of the informal conversations, and I think part of it is that if you're talking development to HUD standards in the floodplain, it's a lot harder than just development to HUD standards. So that's, I think, another part of the thinking on the, by the state of Vermont officials who've got to review all these applications, is that Stanley Watson is just fundamentally more difficult because of that.
Now, in Stanley Watson, obviously you have the RFQ. There's no RFQ for Woody Avenue, so when you apply for the grant, how does the signal, can you just state the intent?
So we would have, if we receive the CDBG funds, we would have 5 years to spend them. And so there's additional select board updates between now and then. Of course, the CDBG process is really truncated. But the concept would be, we'll have a full application ready soon enough with some consulting help, but if we could essentially make this site free or darn near close to free from the perspective of the Waterbury taxpayers, makes it easier to attract a developer who might put some other consideration first. The other HUD piece is that seniors 65 and over are automatically considered low and moderate income by their standards. There's not an income test required if that's who you're, if that's your clientele. And so from that perspective, I think it's a bit more attractive. Does that answer it pretty well? Okay. Get 65, but you may be right.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for the question. Again, good clarification around what the grant application is. Again, that would then towards a further process that way, the housing development. Any other questions, comments, updates from the board on this?
I guess I'll add, because all of the other properties are added in. Have we taken any further look at that property and that we own in Waterbury Center?
I have not. I personally wanted to get through the Better Connection study as part of that.
Any other questions, comments, updates? Anyone online? Alright. I will move us to our next item, which is select board and municipal manager informational updates. Again, just sharing info of things that have happened from the last meeting, things that need further discussion, and go to the next item, review next meeting agenda. Tori, do you have any updates? All right, awesome. Mike?
Nothing further, I haven't been doing meetings since.
Roger?
Nothing further than.
Dane?
Nothing.
I tried to go last so that it wouldn't be an Alyssa monologue. Okay, the relevant updates I have with the select board, since our last meeting, I've been to our housing task force meeting. And Roger and I also both attended a meeting with the planning commission about the town plan, and I think that's particularly the item I want to highlight for both the board and the public. One of the things that's happening in the background right now is that the planning commission is working on updating our town plan, which has to be done by 2026. They've done things like a townwide survey that had over 400 responses. We talked about this at our last two meetings around goals and aspirations. So what was interesting and fun and a little messy, let's be frank, at the last meeting was then the work of compiling all of those. So we had the input from Tom, we have input from EFUD, the select board, and what the planning commission is working on is, all right, what are the goals and aspirations from everyone? We started with the local government chapter. I think I just mentioned offhand that next Monday, the 8th, they're doing housing, so part of the housing task force meeting was finalizing the input on goals, aspirations, and strategies for housing. Again, these are for the next town plan, which will span 8 years. But basically, for the rest of the next 6 weeks, they're doing this for all different chunks of the town plan. So if you go onto the planning commission page on the town website, there's a link to Plan WTB, which is the town plan update process. And there's a schedule of what's being talked about, and there's gonna be, again, even more input opportunities for the town plan. The planning commission has to have hearings, we as the select board have to have hearings, but this was really like a working session where we were able to have some back and forth and say, this board really cares about this, what does this board care about? Are those in agreement? Are they in conflict? And kind of work it out real time. I want to give the planning commission a ton of kudos for all the background doing it, and staff, and we have a consultant. So mostly just put that generally on everyone's radar. I'm gonna try to attend as many as I can. And then also, I guess, just for the board, say that I think a discussion around future utility growth is a real point that I think is gonna be something on our future agenda. We had EFOD the Edward for our utility district, and it feels like they're a operator of a current system, and something like a desire for future growth is really gonna need to be a select board prerogative. So I was pretty candid that I was, I didn't have a select board position on what we wanna do on that, but I feel like it's coming to head through this issue, that there's a lot more. So that's really the stuff that we did the board. Roger, you were gonna things to add on this.
No, the talk that Owen Seti Bicati and I focused on more was the economic development piece of it. I think that revitalizing Waterbury is taking on more of that part of the community vitality. Previously, the Waterbury Area Development Committee had back in the 2018 planning plan. They had taken the lead on a lot of this, but that committee is not as active as it had once been. And so I think that revitalizing Waterbury is seeing itself taking on more of that role, and will be trying to get further input from various parts of our business community to advise on the town plan.
And I would say, like Harry Shepherd and others were there, and also pointing to the opportunity we've already named tonight around CHIP and kind of infrastructure growth, and just making sure that town is well positioned to take advantage of those things in appropriate ways, and having that be incorporated as part of the town plan. That's all I had. Tom, over to you if there's any updates that you haven't already covered tonight.
Yep, I hope by the 15th I'll have some draft numbers for a rec building. No, we still have to do the rec capital plan, but that might be a good day to tentatively schedule Katerina. I don't know if I shared this already or not. I know I shared that 36 Union Street was approved for a FEMA buyout. I think right after that meeting, the next day, I found out that 40 Union is also approved. I'm not sure if I got that to you or not, just wanted to be clear.
How many houses in that strip have not been?
There's two more we're waiting on and haven't heard a word on those. Ran into some challenges paving Bidwell. They took 1.5 inches off of the road, and the idea was mill off 1.5 inches and put down 1.5 inches, and under that 1.5 inches, they found a lot of dirt. So with our public works director being on vacation, talked to Celia and Alec, and we decided that there was too much dirt, that we just had to take the rest of the road out to see what was underneath. So we wound up taking the rest of the road out. It was a good thing because there wasn't much under it but dirt. I had assumed that was a typical old Vermont road, and you'd find 8 layers of road and brick and cobblestone, but in fact it was built in the 70s. So the dirt came out, some good gravel went in, and 2.5 inches of blacktop went in the end. So it's certainly over budget, not a concern in the short term because it's covered by the grant, but in years 2 and 3, when we do the rest of the grant, we'll have to address some of those challenges. But there's a few years to get there, and in the end, I think we just had to do the right thing for the road and build it so it's gonna last.
Are you saying that they built it wrong in the 70s?
No, I'm not saying they built it wrong. I think if we'd have put down the 1.5 inches, we would have regretted it in a few short years. And then just want to mention, there's been some front porch forum chatter about the waterworks and the trails. That is EFUD land, but at the same time, I know it's a pretty big community resource from a recreation perspective. EFUD is going to take up, I think, that issue in earnest over the next few months. So you might be interested in joining. That's it.
Awesome, thanks, Tom, appreciate it.
Also, I had one other thing to add, as part of this, the towns of Moortown, Duxbury and Waterbury are looking to meet to discuss development, the south side of Waterbury, including a bridge over the river. And then Duxbury and North Moortown, which is interested in putting in multifamily housing, but need a sewer extension to connect to the Waterbury sewer system in order to do so. That meeting's gonna take place on the 30th of September. Yeah. 6th.
Thanks, Roger. Any other informational updates?
What sort of representatives do they want? Who is it select board members?
It's a planning commissions, Neil Leitner will be there. I got invited by virtue of the bylaws of Waterbury.
And from the, yeah, and from the EFUD perspective, it's really not EFUD's project as the lead. Duxbury or Moortown would have to take the lead on essentially building the extension. And EFUD would own it in the end, provided it's built as specs, but it's really the other towns, I think, desire to expand the service.
All right, I'll move us to next meeting agenda for those with the printed agenda, give my best on the back. Most of this was holdover thing, like capital plans for public work. Let's see, we also, I'll just mention that we want to put Stanley Watson on this agenda as well as a not the big formal input opportunity, but to continue update and input. Is there other specific things besides those mentioned here folks would like to see for September 15th?
If there's time, the event permit will probably be heading there too.
And if there's time, I may have some items to get back to you on parking, speeding, etc.
I was just gonna ask you about law enforcement.
Or. I was gonna say, if you're not next meeting with parking lot, I mean, you wanna just put in ordinance review.
Review of historic town meeting attendance research
Yeah,
from Evan. What is it?
I spoke with Evan briefly about this. He's collected some data about the attendance at the town meetings going back. Some more detail to that, but I suggest we might want to put that on the agenda for the 15th. And I've also confirmed that Susan Clark, the town moderator in Middlesex, who's written a book about improving town meetings, has agreed to come if on the 15th, if we want to put that on the agenda.
Great.
We can wait, yeah, we can wait.
Sounds good. So Eric, is it maybe work? Any other thing? Feels like a healthy agenda, and if folks have additional input or ideas, again, I usually meet with Tom weekly to review this, and again, welcome to at any point. And go from there. Anything else on that? Right, I think we have an executive session for labor negotiations, not anticipating any action. And that's our last item.
Can I just say, from here overseas, my thanks to the select board. I realize that it's Labor Day weekend and there have been people who have been away and have children and so forth were committed, but I certainly appreciate you all working on Labor Day and taking this job so seriously. So really appreciate your service.
Thanks, Lynn, appreciate that.
I think
Thank you all,
Thank you.
have a good night.
Okay. I move to find that premature public knowledge of labor negotiations will place the town of Waterbury at a substantial disadvantage.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
I have further discussion. I recommend this select board calls on its legislative representatives to simplify the motion to go into executive session.
Noted, and will be reflected in the minutes.
Just got used to it.
Agreed.
Did we vote yet?
Not on entering. I move to enter executive session and invite the town manager.
All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we'll move to executive session.